one, this is the first one, and the second one is this one. But it's only 3. So this is the first one.
Yeah. We need help. And there's nobody we can bring in to help. None of those previous coaches.
They are out here. And that's one good thing you have. They're trying to build fidelity.
Well, yeah, and I do want them to do that. However, I'd like to stay away from her. It's hard to justify. Go ahead and do a budget request. Get you a what do you need? A sports teacher? Or you need someone above you?
Need someone to counsel that.
5, 7 years.
That means you get into an administrator, which costs.
I really don't know.
Let's talk about that and figure out what you need in a row. Yeah, and try to get a budget request in on Friday. Talk to might get turned down.
What we do is, we shut down. That little girl from Brooklyn. We're going forward.
No, this is the same one. Yeah, that's the one that's been done for 7 years.
Yeah,
This one's from You have extra one? Let's try that one. Maybe it's
That's for Louisville. That's what we need Louisville.
I didn't have time. She's not going to today. So, it's okay. I did this.
All right. You're good. Oh, I'm very good.
All right, if I could ask the board members to please take their seats and we will go ahead and get started here.
Here we go. Oh, we go. No, mine was down there also.
I was asking you to smack
Chop, chop.
principal authorities. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Good evening and welcome to the September 14th meeting of the Jefferson County Board of Education. Prior to this meeting, the board conducted 3 work sessions, one on the working budget for fiscal year 2015-16, a second on the strategic plan, which we're calling Vision 2020, and the third on our post-secondary partner relationships, that is, our relationships with colleges and universities that help us with training, research, and in many other ways. So good work sessions. Thank you to everyone who was able to be there. And now please join us in our traditional moment of silence. All right, thank you. Let us now stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Board Member Steph Horn will now read our vision statement.
All JCPS students graduate prepared to reach their full potential and contribute to our society throughout life.
Thank you, Steph. It's now my pleasure to introduce Ms. Terry Robinson for this evening's recognitions.
Thank you.
Dr. Hargens, Board Chair David Jones Jr., and members of the Jefferson County Board of Education. Tonight, it is our great honor to recognize the 15th District PTA recipients of the Kentucky PTA Awards. The Jefferson County Board of Education and the Jefferson County Public School District recognizes these distinguished honorees who exemplify outstanding service, leadership, and commitment to our local school PTAs for their support and contribution to helping us promote the educational success of all our students. 15th District PTA President Heather Wampler, please come forward and join our board members for the PTA recognitions. We begin with District 1, Vice Chair Diane Porter. Please come forward and congratulate the school PTA award recipients in District 1. PTA President Sharice Cook and Assistant Principal Kim Jones, Kennedy Montessori Elementary. Principal Beverly Johnson, Johnson Traditional Middle. PTSA President Vanessa Bevel and Principal Jennifer Cave, No Middle School. PTA Representative Trish Klein and Principal Jerry Mays, DuPont Manual High School. PTSA President Gay Adelman and Principal Benita Benbow, the Academy at Shawnee. Thank you. Board Chair David Jones Jr., please congratulate the school PTAs in Board District 2. PTA President Cindy Woodruff, Barrett Traditional Middle. Will Calabro, PTA President, and Counselor Tammy Terry, Benet School. PTSA President Karen Bennett and Principal Steve Heckman, Highland Middle School. PTSA President Desiree Harnett and Principal Terry Reed, Jefferson County Traditional Middle School. Board Member Stephanie Horn, please come forward to extend congratulations to staff and school PTAs in Board District 3. Elizabeth Waddle, Outstanding Classified Personnel Award winner. PTA President Ashley Wilson, Principal Tracy Barbara, and Teacher Patty Roach, Dunn Elementary School. PTA Representative Connie Bowden and Principal Bill Perkins, Wilder Elementary. Principal Michael Kelly, Outstanding Educator Award recipient, and PTSA President Heather Frost, Crosby Middle School. Board Member Chuck Hadaway, please congratulate the school PTSA in Board District 4. PTSA President Eddie Squires and Principal Kimberly Sawyer, Pleasant Ridge Park High School. Thank you. Board Member Lyndon Duncan, please come forward and congratulate the school PTAs in District 5. PTA President Marion Vassar and Principal Melody Raymond, Blue Lick Elementary School. Principal Adrian Oldham Rhodes, Lockoff Elementary. Board Member Dr. Lisa Wilner, please congratulate the school PTA in District 6. PTA President Krista Baldwin, Principal Tiffany Marshall, Audubon Traditional Elementary. Chair David Jones Jr., please come forward to extend congratulations to Sherry Dymar, the newly elected Kentucky PTA President and a former 15th District PTA President who served from 2011 to 2013. She has 3 daughters who all graduated from DuPont Manual High School. Joining in the recognition is Heather Wampler, 15th District PTA President. Dr. Hargens and members of the Jefferson County Board of Education, this concludes our recognitions for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson, and thank you to all of our recognized recipients. Is there a vote to receive the recognitions, a motion for such? Ms. Porter moves, Chuck seconds, all in favor, carries unanimously. Thank you very much. While we're at it, is there a motion to approve the minutes of the previous meeting? Brady moves, Wilmer seconds, all in favor, also carries unanimously. There are no action items this evening, and I wonder if prior to the information items, Dr. Hargens, we should invite any guests who would like to leave to do so. I think that's the right point in the agenda for that to happen. All right, usually we say all students can go home and do their homework, but just in case there are any busy parents who need to get home or others, feel free to exit at this point, or you are welcome to stay with us and hear Dr. Hargens' report. Don't all sit down at once. Oh well.
Oh, okay. No, just kind of. That was part of the cost of being there too. Right. 8:30. Where? I think so. Just good deal.
Okay, Donna, take it away.
Thank you, Chair Jones, members of the board. I have a few items. Cabinet and direct reports and stakeholders met on Monday, August 31st, actually for 4 hours, to begin to create a draft of the strategic plan, Vision 2020, based on the input that we've received. Today, the Interim Joint Committee for Education met at Fairdale High School. Legislators took a tour of the school before the meeting. Principal Brad Weston gave a presentation on the Cambridge International Program. The following alumni were inducted into the Valley High School Hall of Fame on Saturday, September 12th. Bob Ball, Dr. Robert Beanblossom, Dr. Kent Brown, Fred Kopis, Tanisha Blakely Marshall, Bob Richardson, Irvin Spencer, Dr. James Sublett, Paul Thornhill, Thomas Lee Waller, Judge Waller, and Dennis L. Williams. So congratulations to the new inductees into the Valley Hall of Fame. I got the opportunity to tour the school with the class of 1965, and they could remember classrooms and names. And one of the gentlemen looked at me and said, you know what? I didn't grow up in a good circumstance. This school made all the difference to me. So congratulations to the class of 65 on your 50th class reunion. But more good news. Congratulations to the Wagner High School Athletics Dragon Boat Team, who were the Scholastic Division champions in the Louisville Dragon Boat Race this past Saturday at the festival. And congratulations also to Western High School, who placed third. Other participating teams were Atherton and Butler High, and we even had a JCPS team. So congratulations to all who were rowing in the right direction. The calendar committee for the 16-17 school year held its first meeting on September 3rd. After overall positive feedback regarding the current calendar structure, JCPS management is working on a calendar modeled after the 14-15 and 15-16 approved calendars. So the highlights of the calendar: a mid-August start, a small fall break, 2-week winter break, a spring break, the first full week of April, and an end date scheduled prior to Memorial Day, weather permitting, of course. This calendar has 4 makeup days scheduled throughout the school year, with the remainder scheduled to be made at the end of the year. The only real point of discussion during the first meeting centered around possibly moving a makeup day to the Thursday prior to the Kentucky Oaks and Derby from the Thursday prior to spring break. But committee members were instructed to solicit feedback or suggestions from their respective constituencies, and they'll bring them to the next meeting, which is scheduled for Wednesday, September 16th at 4 p.m. at Atherton High School. So the proposed 16-17 school year will be presented to the board as an information item at the September 28th board meeting, and will be submitted to the board for approval at the October 12th board meeting. So Chair Jones, this concludes my report and my recommendation for approval of the consent agenda later in the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Hargens, and I think I can speak for the entire board and say thank you to the community representatives on the calendar committee. That is thankless work, because there's no possibility of 100% agreement on what the calendar should be, but we're very lucky that people are willing to get involved and help us with that. So let's see, I already jumped the gun and said that there are no action items. There are 2 important information items. The first one, Dr. Hargens, would you like to introduce the panel on the TEL survey?
Absolutely. We have 3 presenters. So Dr. Marco Munoz, Brent McKim, president of JCTA, and Principal Rhonda Cosby will actually present not only what the TEL survey data gives us, that information it gives us, but more importantly, how does that data turn into action? So I will turn it over first to Dr. Munoz.
Actually, I believe I'm the lead-off person this evening. I think you received the PowerPoint in advance, so you probably had an opportunity to look at what the goals of our presentation are going to be, so I won't reiterate that. I'll just go directly into the presentation and say, I am Brent McKim, President of the Jefferson County Teachers Association. It's a pleasure to be able to be here and share some of this information with you this evening. If you look at the TEL survey and you ask why does this really matter? What does it get at? I think 3 key things would include understanding that educators' working conditions are students' learning conditions. So as we're analyzing these working conditions, we're also analyzing the learning conditions for the students. Also, working conditions affect our ability to attract and keep quality educators, not only in our school district as a whole, but in individual schools. So we like continuity. That's good for the students and for the schools. So this kind of information allows us to improve the conditions that contribute to stable staffing. So that's positive. And finally, these indicators are demonstrably related to student success. The types of use that we put the TEL data to includes using the information to give us a way to quantify what has heretofore largely been qualitative indicators so that we can better support and assess progress. Also, this information allows us to see the areas on which we really need to work and where to focus our efforts to get the most bang for the buck, both in terms of resources and time. And thirdly, this data can help us assess programs and strategies to look for evidence of whether the programs and strategies are in fact improving what they're designed to improve. To talk about the TEL survey, it's probably helpful to be sure we're all speaking the same language. First of all, TEL is an acronym. It stands for Teaching, Empowering, Leading, and Learning. And the TEL survey is a survey that's implemented by the New Teacher Center. And the New Teacher Center actually works with many states to implement various iterations of this same TEL survey. And we were not the first, but we have had the highest participation rate of any state, so we feel good about that. The TEL survey asks many questions, but they are grouped into similar sets of questions, and those are called a construct. So a construct is a set of questions that are on a certain topic. Each of the questions themselves is known as an item. So constructs consist of a number of items. At this point, I'm turning over the presentation to Marco.
Thank you, Mr. McKim. Let's briefly talk about the survey itself. The TEL survey has 8 constructs, and on this slide you can see an illustrative item associated with each of the 8 constructs. For example, you take the construct of time, you can see that it has 7 items, and a sample item would be the one associated with teachers having enough time to collaborate with colleagues in such places like the professional learning communities. Response rate matters when it comes to survey results because that's the only way that you can use the data with confidence. JCPS had a 76.5% response rate, and that's considered adequate. Another important survey research element is the psychometric properties. In a specific, the validity and the reliability of the survey. TEL survey would be considered a valid and reliable instrument. When it comes to data analysis, sometimes using a deductive process can be very helpful. And it starts with analyzing the generic construct and then going down to the specific items. However, even great data analysis that lack action plans are insufficient. So we analyze the data to make improvements. These slides summarize the results of the survey. And as you can tell, JCPS is doing well in the majority of the TEL constructs, in 6 out of the 8 constructs. You can see that there's an 80% or more agreement. And by percent agreement, we mean the combination of strongly agree with agree. However, there is always room for improvement. Time, first. Managing student conduct, second. Those present an opportunity for growth. But now let's drill down a little bit more by looking at the individual items.
May I just ask one clarifying question on this, this graph? What do the blue lines represent? Are they, is 70 and 80, are those state minimum maximums or comparative points?
No, we just look at the pattern in the data and we came up with those lines. Actually, those lines came from our data management team. And basically, it's just a way of making sense of the data, like helping with interpreting the data. So pretty much like in the survey research world, if you have an 80% agreement or more, you can confidently say that there's an adequate level of agreement. If you are below that, then you start asking questions, and it is clear in the pattern with the data that the time construct is the one that really like highlights.
So time is the outlier here.
Absolutely.
And is there, do you also analyze this in comparative context? Either does the TEL, I don't remember the name of the organization, but do they have national data or state? I mean, where do we stack up?
Right.
Because I didn't see that in the
That's
chart.
a great question. Typically, like what we do is that first of all, at the school level, we look at the progress over time. So we look at the trend data.
Yeah.
The second element is also looking at the district level data and looking again at the trend data. And then we also compare ourselves against the state data. So those are, but it's a good point. We can always look at the data from a national perspective. We have not done that, quite honestly.
Okay, well, I don't know whether it's meaningful, but to your main point, which is connected to action,
absolutely,
it seemed useful to know where we are on target and where we're an outlier.
Yeah, one thing that we have done though is that we have looked at how we perform compared to the benchmark districts, and I have some data here that I will be happy to share if this is the time. But we looked at Baltimore County and Charlotte Mecklenburg and Fayette County on different constructs, specifically to time, looking at the community involvement and looking at conduct, and we will be happy to share that information with you.
I would be curious. Thank you.
We experienced our greatest loss on a couple of items. The data shows a declining pattern related to the construct of professional development. However, this should not be a source of concern, since we're still at that 80% agreement mark, and that's one construct that we are above the state average. Where we really need to focus our improvement efforts are on the items related to time, such as increasing our efforts to minimize the amount of routine paperwork that teachers are required to do. In fact, we dig down a little bit more with the data, and we were looking at which particular school level we had the lowest, the highest area of concern, and we uncovered that middle schools had a 45% agreement on that item. So it seems that teachers at the middle school level are experiencing that the amount of routine paperwork is just too much. This point is pretty relevant to what we're trying to do here, because it's taking away instructional time, which is one of our most valuable assets for all kids, but more so for our academically at-risk students. So we gotta be careful there. Other items related to parental involvement and managing student conduct also needs our attention. When looking at data, though, we have to always remember to celebrate our success. Thanks to KDE and our JCPS management information system, our internet bandwidth has dramatically improved. More importantly, we can see a great pattern of success in our TEL data when it comes to JCPS academic services in general and the Department of Curriculum and Instruction in particular. From the data, we can see, or we can tell, that curriculum, instruction, and assessment are well aligned in the context of professional learning communities that use data to improve student learning. I now turn the presentation to the perspective that matters the most, the schools, the classrooms. Ms. Cosby.
Hi, I'm Rhonda Cosby. I'm the principal of Chancey Elementary. The TEL survey is the teacher's voice at the school level. The results provide feedback that will directly or indirectly impact student achievement. As an administrator, I must use the TEL survey feedback to grow professionally and improve the working conditions of our school community. The construct that needs the most improvement will be addressed in my principal's professional growth plan and our comprehensive school improvement plan. Oh, you can't hear me. We had some successes at Chansey. We made double-digit gains in 4 of the 8 constructs. The construct of time was one of those gains, and it was part of my principal's professional growth plan. We made double-digit gains, thankfully, in that particular area. There was 100% agreement in 6 of the 8 constructs. Areas of growth, because there's always room for growth, are teacher leadership and school leadership. The constructs with the lowest agreement are time, teacher leadership, and professional development. We will use the resources provided by tellkentucky.org to structure safe conversations around the data. Addressing the areas of growth systemically to facilitate change is critical to improving the working conditions constructs. As a staff, we will examine the individual items that the staff identifies as most pressing to address based on our context at Chansey. We will then analyze and discuss the specific item through guided, reflective, and collaborative conversations. Through this process, we will develop a viable SMART goal to create an action plan to improve the individual teaching condition item.
To close, we wanted to talk to you a little bit about how to use the data effectively, because it is a tremendous treasure trove of information that we have in the TEL survey feedback data, but there are some things to keep in mind as we approach using that information so that we could use it as effectively as possible. First of all, it's important to recognize that with survey information like this, perceptions really are the people's reality in the building. And so if something shows up as an issue, it probably needs work regardless of the cause. Secondly, we intentionally in this survey keep the stakes low so that we can get the most accurate information possible in order to support improvement. Third, it's important for the school to function as a team in processing this information, choosing the areas they want to work on for improvement, designing their improvement strategies, implementing those strategies, and assessing their success. They'll be more effective if they do that as a team. Additionally, TEL provides schools with some things to celebrate, which is good for morale, and it lets us know that we're spending, lets us know if we're spending a lot of time trying to improve something that's actually already pretty good on a relative scale. And finally, when the information's viewed and improvement areas are identified, it's really important to remember that it's not just a matter of picking your lowest indicator. Schools have to identify opportunities for improvement based on what is realistically possible within the school community's ability to impact. So if, for example, the lowest indicator were a technology issue that had to do with the district's internet bandwidth, as it was last time, it really required KDE and the district to improve that. That may not have been the area that the school could have done as much with. So it's important to look at the resources that you have available and where you can make the biggest difference. And with that, I believe that's the end of our presentation, and we'd be happy to address any questions or provide any additional feedback.
Great. Questions? Linda? Then Lisa.
Since we had a participation rate of about 76%, there are a lot of people who didn't speak, not a great deal, but quite a few. And did you look at disaggregating this by priority schools and non-priority schools so we can have kind of a picture of what that looks like?
No, we have not done that, but we will be happy to do that.
I would love to see that by that breakdown. Schools that have more challenges than other schools, I would just love to see how they rate what's going on in their conditions. And I would predict that since we have more non-priority schools, many more non-priority schools, that their scores are probably, or their ratings are probably a lot higher. But the 76%, were those schools not participating, or were they just like random, all over the place people here and there who did not participate in the survey. Do you have any idea of that?
I think that the response rate is quite decent, really. Like it's above the 75% mark.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we can shoot for getting it like for next time around over 80%. I think that it's doable, especially like if we coordinate efforts with JCTA. So I think that's going to be like our target when we do survey again in 2 years from now.
And I would add, from the state's point of view, in order for a school to receive disaggregated data for the building, at least 50% of the staff has to participate. And I believe every one of our schools had at least 50% participation, which is an important threshold that we did meet, so that every school has that data. And I would say, in response to your question, it's largely an individual situation. Every school, more than half the staff participated, so we didn't have any where no one took it. We didn't have any, I don't believe, where less than half took it.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Okay, Lisa?
Yeah, I had the same question that David did. How do we stack up against the state? And I know, because I dug into the data, I know that around the state it was 90% participation. So even though 76 was adequate, I was really kind of surprised that we were so much below. But I wonder how we stood up to the state in other areas.
Yeah, the state has higher percent agreement, but it's slightly higher in many areas.
Okay.
The one area where we are higher than the state is in the one associated with professional development.
Okay. Okay. Another question I have. So I'm looking at the slide with the trend data, the blue bars and the red bars that shows where we were in 2013 and then where we are in 2015. And what's really striking about that is, there's really very little movement. There's a little bit up and a little bit down, which I think just statistically we would expect in a district this size. So what's really more interesting is when we look at it school by school, where we start to see more of a story, right? And more of a narrative of what's happening in particular schools, and where there may be huge increases or huge decreases in some areas. And it was great to hear from you. I love hearing from the principal about how you're able to use that in your particular school. But I'm curious how the district might use that data to inform sort of allocations or even student assignment. I noticed in some schools, teachers were saying, we really don't have enough space here, and others were saying we've got plenty of space. Or, there was just a tremendous amount of variation, and it seems like, as Brent said, this is a treasure trove of data, and it seems like it could be really useful to us, and I wonder how else we're tapping into it.
Well, and actually the area superintendents actually go through the data with their principals and are very knowledgeable about the data. So I would say what it does is allow for differentiated support. It highlights particular issues that the area superintendent can work with the principal to help solve. And as Rhonda said, it is part of the effectiveness system, the growth system. So, and I think Brent said it, is when you get to, the data, there's not enough bandwidth. That's definitely a KDE, JCPS problem. We can impact that. We can probably impact time by asking people to fill out too many things when it might not be necessary. That's an impact we have on time. But some of the other things are school by school. So you see a wide range. So really, those things have to be solved, as I think Brent said, at the school level with collaborating. And Rhonda talked about having honest conversations about what the data says and make sure that it's a safe place to have a conversation about it, because it really is about improvement. So, but school by school with the area superintendents very knowledgeable about the results.
And I would add something that is new that the association is offering is we've developed a professional development workshop opportunity where we're inviting our members to come in, and we're inviting them to bring their building principal or another administrator, if there's a different administrator in the building, that is their TEL lead. And we actually will bring in teams and we'll train them on how to access the TEL information, how to look at it, and we have examples of situations to look at. And what we focus on is we help the school identify some opportunities for growth, and then we help them to see how they can, from the TEL website, find a school that is maybe demographically and geographically very similar to them, but in the area where they really want to focus on improvement, that school may be doing very well. So it looks otherwise very similar to them, but they're having more success. So they're able to identify where they might want to look for improvement strategies, because this school looks very much like us, but in this particular area where we're struggling, they're having more success. So we walk them through that as teams and let them see how they can use the data not only to identify what they want to work on, but maybe some examples of where they can improve.
Okay. Chris?
Thank you. So there's a few questions I had here, and actually some of my colleagues have already addressed this. I mean, obviously state data would have been nice to see here. You know, I find it striking that, you know, we made the comment that, you know, with in regards to time, middle school TEL data survey basically said 45% basically were saying that, you know, they thought they had adequate time in the classroom. If I'm reading, was I reading that correctly, what you said? You know, I would have liked to have seen that actually called out within this presentation, and I think that's what Superintendent just mentioned with the amount of data we're asking our teachers to collect does have an impact on the time that they're able to spend with their students. But overall, my main concern about this is just basically how disappointed I am in this particular presentation. When we did this presentation 2 years ago, we had a much, much better presentation. We had a lot more data to look at. We saw the state data in here. We saw lots of other, we also saw the previous 2 years of data in here. And I can tell you that in 2011, participation data was at 86%, and then in 2013 it went to 80, and this year we're at 76. So this is a downward trend. But that would have been very easy to see in this presentation. And that's all I have to do is just go in here and type in TEL, search, and see the data from 2 years ago. I appreciate that you guys spent some time to come here, and I like the team effort. I like that very much so, but I really do have to say I'm pretty disappointed in the amount of information that's being presented to this board, because 2 years ago we had a much better data set and much better presentation.
Who else? So I've got a couple of questions and comments. First of all, the frequency of the survey is every 2 years, and I wonder if, actually, from each of your three perspectives, if you could comment on that. I know that, you know, the surveying is a very vibrant activity in the world. Sometimes it drives all of us crazy, probably, in our different, you know, different activities. But 2 years seems pretty infrequent, and would there be utility in having more frequent data to figure out how things are going? Marco, you want to start?
Yes. Actually, like, from my perspective, I would say that the results show stability over time. So I think that it might be adequate, like every 2 years, particularly if we put it in the context of the amount of surveys that teachers have to complete on a yearly basis. It seems to me that there's a little bit of what is called survey fatigue. So the timing every 2 years might be good for what we're shooting for, because this is like a low stakes kind of survey, and that's actually like the value of it, because the data is anonymous. And as you can see, like on the constructs on slide 9, you can see that there's not much variance at the district level. Now, at the school level, I could see the value of doing this on a more frequent basis, but again, like, we also have the comprehensive school survey. We are also doing like the student voice survey. So there's a couple of other surveys that we do on a yearly basis. So I'm just worried how it would go in the context of when we put all those surveys on the table.
So you think more might be better, but survey fatigue is a real issue. All right, Principal Cosby.
I would agree. The difference between the first year we took it 11 and then 13 and most recently 15, we had to take time, staff development time, to actually go through the TEL survey. My instructional leadership team and myself, we went through each construct, we went through each item, because based on perspective or understanding, you answered accordingly. So we had to go over it so everyone understood what the questions were really asking, based on, is it something the district can take care of? Is it something at the building level? Each year we've gotten better at taking it, and I think our scores reveal that, and they're open and honest about their answers versus, let me just take another survey. And so educating the educators about the particular survey and what it really reveals for them based on their role has helped. Taking it every year, I don't know how much growth can happen with those particular areas that we need to grow and develop within a year's time. It depends on the construct and the specific item.
Okay. Brent?
I would agree with my colleagues. I think that there is an issue with survey fatigue. Also, as Ms. Cosby was saying, if you think about it, this survey is taken in the spring, so generally there's not a whole lot of SPDM and other activity in the summer, so you get the data back, and so the school may break into committees and use the data to sort of identify issues and eventually develop a plan. And by the time you've identified what you want to work on and work out a plan, if you were looking for a bump the very next year, that might be a pretty short time frame to actually see the bump. Additionally, if you know that this is every other year, you can also sort of strategically plan some other complementary surveys or feedback opportunities in the alternate years, so that you're supplementing it with additional information. So probably in an ideal world, annual information would be good, but I think it would make it probably a little bit even more challenging to keep the response rate at a high level the more frequent it is.
Okay. A second question. 2 years ago, the bandwidth available within the buildings was a clear pants on fire issue, right? It stood out like a sore thumb, and I'm a little bit unclear on, is there an equivalent? I mean, is time this year's issue, or are we kind of in a land of murky, middling performance, or what should we really, because I can't remember very many things. I just need to know what do we really need to focus on.
Well, I'll jump in first. Yeah. I think on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, survival is foundational, and in that regard, the managing student conduct is, I think, a huge, and just safety and so forth is a huge issue, and the fact that that's gone down rather than up, and that's already low. Although, again, it's not the lowest indicator, but I think it's one that is very significant to both employees and students. So, I mean, if I were going to focus one thing, it'd probably be that, followed by time as the second, but I'd say the discipline and safety.
Okay, do you guys have comment on that? Agree, disagree?
I agree. In having the discussion with the people on the panel, time is something as educators we never have enough of. And I know outside of education, it's the same thing. It's managing your time. That's going to be an ongoing issue, I think, for all of us, whether at the administrative level or the school level. And like I said in my earlier in my presentation, we may not tackle the lowest item. We may tackle the item that is that we most need to tackle based on the context. And in this situation, at the district level or as a school system, managing a student conduct would be something where we could show exponential growth with things that we already have in place and continue to grow in that area, and try to better manage our time, which is nicely said, but actually putting that into action is always a challenge.
Right.
I would agree with my colleagues. I think that definitely time requires extra attention. We have to figure it out in what ways it connects with what we are envisioning for our strategic plan, for our district improvement plan at the school level. What does it mean for the school climate committees that we have, for the CSIPs that we are working on at the school level? And then, managing student conduct and community support and involvement seems to be those twin areas that we need to also think about, maybe outside of the box.
Well, I do think the, I'll shut up after one more comment, and then unless somebody else has, I'll toss it back to Linda. Just to connect dots, the question of time, student conduct, all of these things, in the strategic planning work, the board has called out the pruning, if you will, of standardized testing as an important way to try to buy time for more instructional work. I suspect that, it sounds like some of the paperwork and the forms and the many different people asking for different data sets is another potential source of time, and that has to, I would assume, be relevant to more time to build relationship and manage student conduct differently, right? So hopefully we can get these things to come together, although it's not as simple as getting more funding for more routers, right?
Right.
So anybody over here before I toss it back to Linda? Diane, and then Linda, we'll come back to you.
Just want to take a moment to thank you for your time. We've spent a lot of time talking about time. It takes, it takes special people to come to that table, and I don't think that we always realize that, but I appreciate the presentation. It could always be more, it could always be less, but thank you for your honesty. Thank you, Principal Cosby, for talking specifically about your school, because that's revealing, that's revealing of yourself and your staff. Thank you to JCTA for being at the table. And thank you for the research department for the information that you brought to us. And as we have things that we want to see more of, we can do that. I specifically want to see more as it pertains to some of the schools in my district, and I will spend my time looking that up. And if I get caught up in not understanding everything, then I will contact you, because my question is, after we do these surveys and we look at the results, what are the next steps? But primarily, I just wanted to be recognized to thank you for your time and for your efforts for being here tonight and for making the presentation. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Linda?
Well, I was just going to say, given the importance of classroom management, and we just had a presentation before from our university partners talking about working on classroom management skills and the expertise of the teacher, how important those two things are that go together. When I saw that that particular item not be rated very highly, of course I want to know where is this, not, the average doesn't really tell us very much, but I'd like to know where classroom management or managing student conduct tends to be more of an issue for schools. So I really do hope that you will go back and see if we can see this disaggregated a little bit by especially our priority schools and non-priority schools. I'd like to see if we're making progress in that area, because before we saw there was a difference in priority schools and in that particular area. So we'll see if there's any improvement in that. And I thought it was ironic. We've put in place PBIS and PACs and transition centers and SRTs. We've got these things in place, and yet the management, student management dropped on us. So I really do think that's a flag area for us to take a look at and see what's happening, what we can do when we find out, especially the locations where this is a challenge. Some schools, I'm sure it's not a big challenge, but others, I'm sure it is.
I want to brag on my colleague just a moment. I believe Principal Cosby actually had double-digit improvement in both time and managing student conduct, so she might be a good place to look at.
Thanks, Brent. I do want to say that, and this is not an excuse, Ms. Duncan, but the survey is given in the spring. In the spring of any school, ask any teacher. If you give them a survey about managing student conduct, we're hanging on by a thread in the spring of any school year taking a survey about student conduct.
Yeah.
But it's the spring every year. So I have just, I think, to wrap, and then we can let you guys go. I think first, at least I echo Linda's interest in the disaggregation by priority schools. There may be a better, there may be a weighting by poverty index or school performance that is not only the priority schools, but and I guess I would like to leave it to our brilliant data folk to figure out what is the most insightful report that we could get that would perhaps show some correlations that we could act on, not just of theoretical interest. And then the other thing is, I believe the school-by-school information is available online. Can you remind us where that is?
Actually, we have separate slides on your presentation there that you can actually see 3 types of reporting tools, and the website would be the tellkentucky.org. Okay. And the neat thing about the 3 types of reports is that all of them present like different ways of disaggregating the data.
So can we do that by ourselves, what I just asked you for?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
Well, then maybe we should. But we may need a little bit of help. We'll follow up on how to do that. All right. But so I guess the point is, all of this data, school by school, categorized in different ways, is available to the public, to parents, to colleagues, to teachers, to everybody, if you want to go look at it. And again, it's a little bit of a similar theme with the financial information. The transparency website is now up and running, and there are more and more questions that you can just look it up if you want to know what's going on in this district. So any other questions for the panel? Okay, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, is there a motion to receive the report on the TEL survey? Chuck moves, Steph seconds, all in favor? Passes unanimously. Very good. Dr. Hargens, we have another report.
Yes, actually we're going to have more presenters present about ACT results for the class of 2015, which is last year's graduating class. So Dr. Dossett is actually going to present the data, but then we have 3 area superintendents who are going to present about so what. So what do you do when you have this data, and how do you improve the outcomes? So I'll turn it over to Dr. Dossett.
Great, thank you. Tonight we're going to talk briefly, we're going to give an overview of the ACT results. You should have received a board packet a few weeks ago that had school level data and state comparison. So this is really to just summarize the trends that we've seen over time. But before we get to the results, there's just a few key points I want to make sure we're all on the same page around the ACT. One is just to remember that the ACT is just one way that we use to gauge college readiness. There's a couple of other college placement tests that we consider as well, and the ACT is one of those methods for determining college readiness. The second point is that the ACT is a norm reference test. And so what that means is that we can compare our results to students across the state and across the nation. But it's a normative test, so you're not likely to see big changes from year to year. And the third key data point is that everybody in the state of Kentucky takes the ACT. So what you'll see tonight are students' best scores represented, but when you're comparing to the nation, it's important to know that everybody in Kentucky takes the ACT, and that's not always the case in other states. So tonight, this report will cover a few areas. We're going to look at trend data and disaggregated data. We're also going to look at some of our successes and areas to grow, and then we're going to end with a discussion of the strategies around district and school initiatives in order to foster a college-going culture. So when we look at our ACT results, we're really talking about focus area 2 of our strategic plan, graduation and beyond, and in particular target 2, which is around increasing our college readiness rates. And you can see over time we've made big gains in this area. So we were at 31% in 2010, and we're up to 60.5% in 2014. So almost a double-digit gain in our college readiness. And then when we look more specifically at our ACT results, what you see on the screen are 5 years of data around ACT scores. It shows the average score in the 4 content areas: English, math, reading, science, and our composite score overall. And it's on a scale up to 36 being a perfect score, and we have ranges in each of our buildings of students in terms of where they score on that spectrum. But what we can see when we look at this data, and again, ACT encourages us to look at 5-year trends of ACT data because that's where you'll see growth rather than year-to-year fluctuations with a normative test. You can see that we've made gains in all of our tested areas on the overall scores. Then when we look at, from a context of whether students are ready for college, we can look at the ACT results as how they meet different benchmarks. So there's 2 different benchmarks that we always compare our results against. The first one is the ACT benchmark, and what that benchmark lets us do is it tells us the likelihood of a student scoring a C or higher in college level courses. So we set that benchmark, and ACT sets that benchmark and says, okay, if you score an 18 on English, which is the benchmark, then you have a 75% chance of getting a C or higher in an English course once you get to college. And so you can see across the board on this chart, 51% of our students met the ACT benchmark in English, 27 in math, 33 in reading, 27 in science. Another way to look at benchmarks is looking at the Council for Post-Secondary Education. And they set their benchmarks a little bit different than ACT based on the likelihood of not having to take remedial courses once you get to college. So instead of getting a C or higher, this CPE benchmarks are based on whether you're likely to take a remedial course that's not credit bearing. And so the benchmarks are different in reading and math than they are from the ACT benchmarks. But again, you see we've gained in math and in reading and in English over the 5-year period, looking at ACT or CPE benchmarks. And the other important piece about this data is the CPE benchmarks at Council Post-Secondary Education. Those are the benchmarks that they use in our state accountability test. So that's how they determine college readiness, is by using the CPE benchmarks.
Tina, can you shed a little more light on the substance of the difference there? Because, you know, having watched the to's and fro's of education, testing, and benchmarking over the decades, I get really nervous when Kentucky test says we're 40% of our kids are where they ought to be, and ACT or a national normative test says 18% says that. What are we to make of that?
Right. So I think looking at those benchmarks, so for example, math for ACT, the benchmark is 22, and for CPE, the benchmark is 19. And I think mostly that difference and the discrepancy then between 27% meeting the math benchmark on ACT versus 40% meeting it on the CPE is really the difference in how they're defining success in college. and ACT is looking at making a C or higher in those courses, whereas CPE is looking to say, okay, do you have to take remedial courses that don't get you credit? So that's why the benchmarks are a little bit lower for the CPE.
So if you get below a C, you don't need a remedial course?
So your GPA will suffer, but you won't. Remedial courses in terms of having to get a certain score so that you can take college courses for credit. So.
But the CPE is a lower standard?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And when we look at the data by different student groups, this is showing by different race and ethnicities. We see all of our student groups here making growth from 2011 to 2015. Our highest growth was in students from 2 or more races. And we are going to be providing a little bit more disaggregated data by other student groups, but we're in the process of pulling that information together, but we'll include that in the Friday update. So we want to talk a little bit next about those efforts to close the gap and strategies to increase our college readiness. And so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I don't want to steal the thunder from my colleagues here, but just to mention a few key strategies to increase college readiness that are going on in our high schools, and that's the ACT preparatory programs and interventions, our college access resource teachers, and then our real-time college readiness dashboard. And that dashboard is updated throughout the year so that schools can make data-informed decisions about interventions that drives the work of those college access resource teachers. So when we look at some of the intervention data, this is the first year, 14-15 was the first year that we documented intervention data in Infinite Campus. And so what we were able to cull from that is that 70% of our students who were not college and career ready on the previous ACT assessment, 70% received interventions as documented in Infinite Campus, and on average it was about 63 hours per student that they received those interventions, and that ranged from after school interventions to additional courses to particular computer software could have served as the intervention. There's a variety of types. And then when we look at the impact of those interventions on our seniors, what we see is that, and again, this is unofficial data, but at the end of the year 2015, we had more students college ready and career ready as well as a result of those interventions. And the idea here is that the ACT represents one pathway to success after school, but there's also career, academic, and technical readiness as measured by industry certifications, and we're seeing increases in all of those areas.
Could I ask a question? I'm just curious because you said as a result of the interventions, the scores have gone up and 30% aren't receiving the interventions. So are you guys doing a control group and treatment group and doing the comparisons?
Right. We will be able to look at that a little bit more closely, and one of the things that I think we need to control for is I think there's probably also students that are receiving interventions that may not be well documented in Infinite Campus. Since this was the first year of the intervention tab, it's likely that some of that 30% were actually receiving interventions. But one thing that we can do, one kind of analysis that we can do from this data is to look at implementation, fidelity, and dosage. So is it the case that the more intervention hours that we're seeing better results, or what types of interventions are more effective than other types? And that's something that we'll be able to do from this data that we have now in Infinite Campus.
Great, thank you.
So just to summarize some of the highlights, we have seen gains in our seniors over the last 5 years, seniors have increased their average score in all of the tested areas. More students are meeting the state college readiness benchmarks. That's the Council for Post-Secondary Education benchmarks in reading and math. And then we've seen 13 of our 21 high schools improved just over from the previous year, improved or maintained. But there's still areas for growth. More work needs to be done on closing the achievement gap among students from different races. And then even though we've shown gains over the last few years, the district average is still behind the state average. So there's still more work to be done, and we are starting our work early, but we do have some junior data. This is the class of 2016, so these are our junior data from 2015, our current seniors, and what this allows us to do is to go ahead and get and to work with these students and to target interventions by having this data available to us early. And so we want to emphasize that this is, although this is the junior data, we're going to start really early, and you'll hear some of those initiatives from the assistant soups about building the future so that we can see, instead of incremental changes, more significant changes in the future. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Beatty to talk about strategies.
As Dr. Dossett noted, our ACT composite has risen slightly over the past 5 years, but we have doubled the amount of students who graduate college and career ready. So what I want to do right now is take a moment to share with you some of the strategies that are used actually in our high schools to improve to improve our college and career readiness outcomes and to graduate more students prepared. Our high schools utilize ACT prep programs. Those are usually either they take place during the school day or take place after school. They're either sponsored by the school or they're sponsored by an outside organization. And we have a lot of support from community partners with regard to our Friskies, our LEAP program, et cetera. Those ACT prep programs focus on test-taking skills in addition to additional content instruction. So actual preparation for the ACT is that first way in our high schools for our juniors and seniors, and even students a bit younger than that start to think about college going. Secondly, a little bit more long-term piece in our high schools is that our curricular documents are aligned to the ACT benchmarks, ACT Quality Core, and the ACT College Readiness Standards. When a freshman walks into one of our high schools, our principals have current data, and they know whether or not at that point in time, whether that student is on a trajectory to be college ready based upon ACT benchmarks. So schools will do things like schedule students into additional classes. They may double dose reading, they may double dose math, and start those interventions at grade 9 in order to begin that process. We take advantage of our data dashboards to maintain that real-time data. And as Dr. Dossett mentioned, we do have preliminary data on our class of 2016 graduates. And right now in our high schools, we are working with those students who have not met those benchmarks, either the CPE benchmarks or the ACT benchmarks, to ensure that they get additional instruction and other ways to meet that college and career readiness benchmark. You can ask any high school principal. They're going to tell you how many seniors they have, how many are college and career ready, how many they need, and what they're doing. Because the intervention for a student who is 1 or 2 points away from meeting a benchmark is a little different than intervention for a student who might be 5 or 6 points away. So we really differentiate, name and claim that achievement. And then as assistant superintendents, we use the principal PLC process to ask principals those questions and to exchange ideas. And this collaborative work requires principals to know their data and encourages them to share best practices.
We've also worked on creating a college-going culture. It's important for students to see themselves as future college students. There's a lot of ways that schools do this. We're going to give you a couple this evening. You might remember the event we had at the Yum Center where students who had been accepted into colleges were celebrated last spring. High schools also have workshops around the federal application for Federal Student Aid, or FAFSA, you might have heard it called that. That form is long and complicated. And so these workshops help families make their way through that, navigate that whole process so that their students will be eligible for financial aid. We also partner with multiple community agencies in college-going programs. One example of that is our partnership with the mayor on the Close the Deal program. The mayor goes to selected high schools and he talks to the students about how they are going to be citizens in our city. And he wants them to be successful citizens, contributing citizens. So he talks to them about going to college, going to university, or other post-secondary institutions. We also have representatives from colleges and universities at those programs to talk to students about how to make that happen in their lives. Our high schools also have advisory programs. In advisory programs, students meet in small groups with adults to discuss things about the college-going process, like how to fill out a college application, the FAFSA again, or selecting a major. So all of this work at high schools is crucial. It's really important. We need to have our students ready for the post-secondary choice that they have, the two-year college, trade school, the military, some other pathway. But this does not start in 9th grade. It starts much, much earlier. We have to look at the work of all schools at all levels to improve achievement. So the Academic Services Department has long-term plans to improve achievement.
So as we stated, we are building the future. Dr. Dossett talked to you about the ACT data. Dr. Beatty talked to you about the preparation that schools have in there to prepare the students for ACT. Ms. Dennis just talked to you about the college-going culture that we had. And as we said, we must have a long-term plan, and we must start that at an early age. We must have systems in place and structures. And to do that, we have our 3rd grade pledge, closing the opportunity gap, and encircling each child. With the third grade pledge, we have been collaborating with the community, also ensuring that the early childhood is a very, very important part of that. Collaborating and making sure the principals in the elementary school, making sure that those students are able to read by the time that they leave 3rd grade. It is very important that they're able to read by the time they leave 3rd grade. So that 3rd grade pledge is very, very important as we collaborate and work with community on that. Closing the opportunity gap, working together and collaborating with those important partners in the community, as well as that initiative that we have, Males of Colors, ensuring that we are meeting the equitable needs of our GAP students and ensuring that we're giving them what they need as well to continue to improve the student achievement in the district. When we're talking about encircling each child, we want to ensure that we're meeting the needs of those students, social, emotional, and the academic needs as well, that we are providing individual prescriptives for them. We know that one size does not fit all. We must look at these kids individually and provide the necessary professional development for principals, for teachers, to be able to provide those needs for them. We are a district that believes in continuous improvement, but I do believe that we're moving in the right direction because we are about every child, every day in the classroom. And if we are going to reach our district's vision, every child in JCPS graduate, prepared and beyond, we must start now with what we're doing now with pre-K through 12th grade in order for all of our students to be college and career ready. So having that structure and systems in place, we are building the future. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I assume you guys are now ready for questions.
We are.
Do you have any questions? Yes, Mr. Pratt.
back in the day when I took the ACT, I only took it once. And the reason why I only took it once was with two reasons. I was pleased with my score because I had targeted a couple universities I wanted to go to, so I knew what my minimum I needed, but also it was a financial thing as well. But I talk to students, and I hear students take the test more, take the ACT more. I wonder if you have any data about that, or is there more frequency per student in taking the ACT, and have the prep programs increased that? Or I know it's preparing them, but you know, some of the students they're trying to do better each time they take it, and it seems like not back in the day there was a lot taken many times, but now I hear more and more about that. So I'm curious, is that something that's happening now?
Yes, we do see more students taking the opportunity to take the test multiple times. And so while every student takes the test as a junior, we see students continuing in their senior year to take the test repeatedly in order to.
Do you know what to attribute that to, or?
I think
I would attribute it to the work that's going on in our schools, where they're talking to the students about how to hit those benchmarks and different pathways to do that. So I think there's a lot. Back in the day, they weren't talking to you and me about that. But
Right.
now, in every high school, they're having those conversations in those advisory classes.
Yeah, I would hope you would agree that probably the culture that you're talking about, we're creating in the schools, are doing that as well. Now, if I'm a student and I know I'm going vocational, I'm going to a trade right after that, what's the appeal for me to go ahead and take the ACT? How do we pitch that woo?
Well, for one, all juniors have to take
Right, right.
and so, but we also, as part of the, you heard earlier about the ACT benchmarks and the CPE benchmarks and college and career readiness. A student who's in an academic or a technical program, they have a technical aspect to being career ready, which means they complete a program, but there's also an accompanying academic component, which is either an ACT score or a test that's given in that particular discipline. So, and that's one of the challenges that schools face. That very thing is that they do that. So, but I think a lot of schools incentivize. They do lots of work, and in our high schools, what you'll see is it's sort of the, you know, have you met your benchmark yet? Are you staying after to work? So that culture, Mr. Hadley, that you mentioned, I think sort of helps those students who might not normally take it because they may already have their trajectory or their future plans identified, but they continue to work towards that, so they keep their options open.
Okay, thank you.
And we talked to them about that as far as when we're talking about closing the opportunity gap, even though that is with Common Core. Again, the culture that principals have built in the building is to give them that option, to keep your options open, because you may get out in the real world and decide that you don't want to do that career, and you may decide that you want to go to a two-year college, and you may need that ACT score. So you want to be able to keep your options open and to expand them. So we have those high expectations, and we continue to encourage them. You don't want to close any door. You want to be able to keep every option open, so that when you get out there, then if you want to fall back on that, then you have a broader opportunity to be able to expand that opportunity.
That's a good point, and if that's being communicated, that's
Yes,
well
it
done.
is.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Diane?
Thank you for your presentation. I have a couple of questions when we talk about the ACT prep programs and the boot camps. Who is eligible to participate in those programs? Is there a specific grade level for students, or is it anybody that wants to?
Those are usually school-based decisions on how those things are handled. I know if schools sometimes may place a premium or an emphasis on the juniors since they're taking it for accountability purposes, but then you have seniors, and in some cases you have freshmen and sophomores taking it. So that's a school-by-school decision on how they do those things. I do know that access to those types of programs is available for all students, but schools and how they handle it, whether it's during the day or whether it's after school. But the boot camps that you refer to, you'll see they're very popular with seniors for obvious reasons, because it's closer. It's a few months away, and so. But then again, that work towards college-going culture that we talk about, you start to get more juniors thinking about that, and it starts to move its way down into earlier grades.
As we look at students that participate in the prep programs and the boot camps, do we look at the data that shows if they are scoring higher than students that have not participated in those programs? Is there any data about that at all?
There is, and schools are watching that data and making some important decisions, because they might contract with a company to help them, and so they look at those kids who went through that program. Was that money we put out for that worth it? Was it not? What we found is it's a mixed bag in many cases. So for some students it really worked, for others it didn't, and it kind of goes back to what Ms. Dillard mentioned about looking at each individual child and what does that child need. But we are keeping track of that data.
Okay, and one more, I think. If I'm a student and English is not my primary language, how do you help me with forms like the FAFSA? Because that form is complicated. So what services do we have in place to make sure that we're reaching out to all of our students?
Our schools who serve ESL, English Second Language students, are really good at this. So the counselors are often the ones who are responsible for these FAFSA programs, and they'll make sure that we have translators there on the evening of the family presentation, so they can help families understand and walk through that process. Because you're right, it is complicated. It helps all of us for kids to be able to fill out that form, because then they are eligible for federal financial aid and other financial aid, which they will not be if they don't get that form. So everybody's very motivated to help families and students through that process.
Okay. And one other comment, as we talk about testing students that are in the 11th and 12th grade, should there be a focus on making sure students are taking the more rigorous courses as they come into high school? Because once upon a time, and I think we still too take algebra in the 8th grade, so are we encouraging students to prepare themselves for testing in the 11th and 12th grade? Is anyone reaching out to talk about the importance of taking the hard classes early on?
As a previous administrator and with other colleagues, I would say yes, because even with those ESL students, even if they're in like ESL 1, they are still enrolled in like English 3, so they're getting a double course and they're not behind. So they are still getting those rigorous courses as well. So I would say yes, that the principals are ensuring and still talking to them about getting those rigorous courses so that they are not lagging behind.
Okay. I thank you for your presentation, and I do ask the special questions about our students that do not necessarily come to us speaking English, because last year there was a student that graduated from Central High School who came to this country speaking no English at all, and now has gone to college on a scholarship because along the way someone took the time to spend with him to make sure that he got all the information done correctly. So thank you for your report, and I would just hope that we would continue to, the arrows continue to go up and be more inclusive for more students. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Steph?
I really appreciated this report a lot. I'd be interested in knowing about the gifted and talented, kind of that part of the spectrum, and how we're doing, like the trend is for the last 5 years.
Yes, that's actually part of the disaggregated data that we'll provide in your Friday update.
Okay.
Is that information.
How is it though? Is it trending positively also, or do you recall?
Yes, I think you'll see the same type of pattern with our students that are gifted and talented or in advanced program, is that we'll see growth, but it'll be incremental over the last 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Linda?
I just want to point out a few things. Of course, when I took the ACT, like Chuck, I took it as a senior. I didn't take it as a junior, and took it one time. And there were only about 18 people in my class who took it because that's all who planned on going to college. So the game has changed dramatically, and everybody has to keep remembering that when these scores come in at 19.1 and it stays the same at 19.1 from one year to the next, that's actually, for me, a gain, because I know our populations are changing every year. This population's changing, and it's getting more and more at risk. We have more and more kids trying to learn English and being asked to take these tests. So a 19.1 staying the same, to me, is a gain, and I'm proud of that, because that takes a lot of work from everybody to maintain the gains that we have with the populations. One thing I noticed about the gaps, we see the gaps, but they're not dramatically widening. They're remaining really very close. The African American improvement was 0.5, I think, from 2011, and the white was 0.7 from 2011, and the Hispanic was 0.8 from 2011. So you don't see dramatic widening of gaps. You see everybody growing, really. I was like Stephanie. I mean, I was expecting to see the disaggregated data by all the groups that we normally compare or that we normally track, and the two race thing threw me, because I don't think we've ever, I don't remember ever seeing a two race score there before. So that kind of threw me.
And this disaggregated data is data that we get from ACT, and so that's how they break out their racial categories. So we're in the process of pulling in the rest of the different groups so that we can provide that disaggregated data to you.
Yeah, I think that's much more meaningful to us to be consistent. We look at 9 groups and let's see how 9 groups are doing in all these areas. That would be very good for us. But thank you all for the presentation.
Chris.
Thank you. So just one other thing that I'd like to request is if we can see how these scores stack up against the districts that we've been benchmarking against. This would be something, because we're unlike most school districts within the state, so we're trying to keep this, a stable set of benchmarks or schools that we're going to benchmark, or district we're going to benchmark ourselves against, and it's would be appreciative, or would be helpful if we can see that information. I am glad that you called out an area for growth for the state score. But again, on this particular presentation, I would have liked to see that state average. I know that we got that information as board members, but this being part of public record, I think it's something we need to have in there as well. So, thank you.
Okay. Thanks. I've got 2 questions. First of all, it seems like interventions help, right? I mean, you all think interventions help here. Are we adequately funding intervention? I mean, could we do more if we had more resources? And I kind of raise this in the category of strategy, and we need to line up our resources with our stated goals. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Sean?
I mean, what's the barrier to more intervention if they work?
What's the barrier to more?
Yeah, why don't we do it more if it works?
Where we start with students before interventions is making sure we have a strong, solid curriculum, making sure we're hitting kids with our Tier 1 program. When we see kids that have gaps, that's when it's time to intervene. In some ways, I think it's a tough question, because every kid has multiple needs, and we could always do more to intervene. What schools are doing is trying to use every last dollar they have to meet the needs of the kids that they have in their buildings, and they're trying to ascertain exactly what those needs are so they can do that.
Still, 40% of them are not college and career ready, right? So
that's right. So there's our task, right? We have multiple pathways to do that. It's not just through the ACT. We have other testing avenues with the Compass and the Coyote, and then through the career pieces as well. So because there's so many options, you have to sit down and talk to each kid and figure out what their pathway is. And as Michelle mentioned, there's going to be lots of kids who do dual plans on that. So So planning those interventions for each kid is essential, and each one individually.
And David, also schools also add additional courses within their master schedule. Like there are some schools where they are able to add into their schedule for kids to take like a remedial, like reading or math course that they take like every day, to like, which is an intervention course. So it depends on what the schedule is, what type of schedule that the school is on. So there are different interventions, but it just depends on the level of the student and where they are and how intense they need to be with the interventions.
Mm-hmm.
So they are doing the interventions. I think it's just a matter of the students, you know, grasping on to that and being there to get that. So we'll just have to continue to be more aggressive with it.
And also by state regulations, students who take that junior ACT who are not meeting those benchmarks, you know, we're required during that senior year to provide additional reading and mathematics instruction and continue to track those hours like Dr. Dossett mentioned earlier. So I think schools are working with the confines of their traditional schedule. And in the past, being a former high school principal, senior year, you know, might be a little, a senior schedule may be a little rigorous now with the number of courses that they take in English and mathematics, but because of that work than we had in the past. So I think that's one piece, and also having the college access resource teachers or CARTs to help with promoting the college going culture, to get those programs and things in place to get students thinking about college, or all the types of resources that we currently have at our disposal to continue to move students forward, and to look at those numbers from the past 5 years to see that the number of students who are college and career ready double is good, but there is definitely more work that we have to do as a district.
And Dr. Dossett, in the Friday update, could you provide example questions from an ACT for the board so they can get the sense of what students are being expected to demonstrate in the ACT? Because I think part of what Ms. Dillard was saying is if you wait to learn to be a real reader by high school, you are going to be able to move the needle a little bit, but you're not going to be able to move the needle the way you want to move the needle. So I think seeing what the questions are like. But again, if you want dramatic improvement, that's built over time. The ability to do well. A perfect ACT score, they didn't get a perfect score, you know, with dramatic improvement in high school.
Yeah, so I think
they built it.
That's what I'm trying to elicit.
Right.
And we can provide not only sample questions or example questions, but the ACT has a standards document that breaks it down by score. So it says if you scored an 18, this is what you're understanding around this mathematical concept. But if you scored a 12, this is your level of understanding versus a 30. So that way you can see on the continuum what students' levels of understanding are related to their score.
But so what I took away from that column is if you have a free dollar to spend it on early childhood, don't spend it on high school remediation. That may be overstated, but all right, let me ask my last question from a different perspective, but I don't understand the grading scales of these different tests, but I am really nervous when I see a data set that shows that on a composite basis, we had a 2% improvement for all of our students in ACT score, but we have an almost doubling of the number who are defined as college and career ready, and where different authorities control a different authority controls each definition. And I don't think this is a question that can be answered tonight, but I think it's important that this board have a point of view on whether we are measuring the right thing. And, you know, so Dina, you can maybe take that as a, you know, send us some reading, or what do we need to understand that, I mean, if one scale is exponential and the other is logarithmic, I mean, there may be an incredibly simple, complicated answer, but it doesn't look right that you see, 0.4 increase in the score and a doubling of CCR.
Right. So I'll go back and get you some further reading.
Is there a simple answer?
But the one simple answer, and this isn't a comprehensive answer by any means, is that again, the ACT is one way to measure college readiness, but there's other different pathways. So the college placement test, the Compass, and the Coyote. So if you don't meet your ACT benchmark, there's opportunities to take those college placement tests, and if you reach a certain score on that, then you are considered college ready. And also with the career ready pieces as well, with the academic test as well as the industry certification. So basically what you're pointing out, that there's not a one-to-one correlation between your ACT score, increases in ACT scores, and college readiness, and that's right. And that's because there's these other ways to get college ready as well. And so the more complicated part of that equation is, can we say that those tests are similar across across standards in terms of their benchmarks? And that's really, I think, what one of the points that you're
Well, I
making.
think it'll be good to educate us, but also, the board has made the ask now of, of the district to assess authentically and broadly, and to the extent we need to move away from magic number kind of testing towards something that really tells our families and their children where they're ready. It kind of needs to start with us, and and this is not a JCPS caused confusion by any means. This is a national complexity issue, but please educate at least me, because I need it. Any other questions or comments for this panel? Okay, thank you all very much. Is there a motion to approve this report? Yes, okay, Lisa and Linda move in second. All in favor? Thank you very much. That passes unanimously. We now come to the consent calendar, which Dr. Hargens has already recommended to us for adoption. Are there any items to pull down for discussion? Okay, Linda?
I'd like to just talk about 9.
So
P9.
P9.
And V, if V is the calendar, is V the calendar, or is that why?
V is the board meeting schedule?
Yes,
Okay,
yes. I'd like to
great.
bring those two things.
Okay, Chris?
Item M and item Q.4.
M is in Mary and Q.4.
Yes.
Shine. Very good.
Oh, and also, I'm sorry, item P.8. P as in Paul.
P as in Paul. Very good. Anybody else? Okay, we will take them in the order in which they arise. M, professional service contracts. That's Chris.
All right, thank you. My concern about this particular item is regarding our extension of the service contract to the PR firm. I'm a little disconcerted about this particular extension, because I know we had originally asked for this contract to run until the end of October, and I know we've been in a process for quite some time of trying to find a communications director, and I just felt like extending this out all the way to the end of January of next year, it's a very long time for this district to go without a communications person. I assume that this is an extension to go to that point. Hopefully, though, having someone fill that position before we get to the end of January. Am I correct in that assumption?
Absolutely. The extension of the contract for $10,000 will not get us to January. It will get us through this process. So I think we put the date out there to be flexible.
Okay.
But it is not enough hours to get you to through January.
All right. I have great concerns about this because this, along with several other positions that have been open for quite a while, I think need to be filled. And I'm fine with extending this one more time, but after that, I'd really would suggest that we really get someone in this position so we can get those other communications positions filled out as well. It's been since May, so this is something that's long overdue.
Are we still intending to fill the position, or are we happy with the outsourced relationship?
Well, actually, we have a great consultant from Guthrie Mays, Bonnie Hackbarth, but the intention is to fill the position. We need a full-time position and those two positions filled.
Okay.
But she's done great.
Thank you. We'll move on to P8, acceptance of funding.
Chair, this is item P.8, and Chair, I'd ask we vote for this separately. This concerns my employer.
Good. Okay, so we will vote on this separately. P.8. P.9, funding from Save the Children Federation. Linda.
P9. Maybe I got the wrong number on there.
That's Hazelwood and Young.
No, you had 8. You said 8. Oh, I'm sorry. The one I wanted was the Carl Perkins money situation.
Okay, sorry, that's 10. Go ahead and ask your question about 10.
All right, that's the one after that. It's not really a question. It was kind of a moment that when I saw this and I see we're sending Carl Perkins, I mean, we don't. It comes through the federal government, the Carl Perkins money going to our 5-star high schools and our and our magnets. And it was kind of a moment that startled me because I'm thinking we're in our new Vision 2020, we're wanting to pursue equity, and that's kind of a theme I think that we've talked about for a long time. And the problem is we're worrying about equity on the school level, and we've got a district that is set up so that it's not equitable. We don't have equitable access. So while in this process of forming the new vision, I hope we understand and include this thinking in here that until we have a whole system that is equitable in its access, I think we're looking almost hypocritical talking to school people out there to talk about pursuing equity and the equity scorecard when things are so different among our schools because of the way we have it set up. It's not an equitable arrangement or an assignment.
Does this relate to the Carl Perkins funding?
Yes. Well, that's what I said. The Carl Perkins funding goes to those schools as well as the others. But what it does is it reminds me to remind us that we got to be very thoughtful in how we talk about what we want equity to look like in our schools on the vision.
Do you want to vote on this one separately?
No, I'm going to vote on it.
Okay.
And on item, do you want me to do?
So the next one is Q4, I believe. Chris, is that yours?
Okay, is that Shine?
That's Shine, yeah.
Okay. So I've got a bit of a concern about this. A couple things. First of all, when looking through this particular item on the agenda, it isn't very apparent that this is actually a fairly, there's a lot of cost involved with this particular project. And just looking through the rationale on the agenda without really deep diving into the attached document, it's not very apparent that, phase 1 is about, $330,000 contract, but phase 2 ramps that up to, phase 1 is $370,000 plus. And then phase 2 actually ramps up to over $3 million. Or actually I'm getting my outsourcing issues here mixed up, but it's actually $2.2 million. My concern about this is twofold. One, that really wasn't very apparent when you're looking at the rationale, and I think that I would like to see that called out within the rationale when we're taking a look at these agreements, especially something at this cost. And secondly, as we continue on with this particular contract, that phase 2 of it being $2.2 million has continued to increase. The other concern I have about this, and it was just kind of hinted upon with the chairman's question to the superintendent, was it seems like we're getting to a point where we're outsourcing more and more services outside of the district. Now, I understand that this relates to early childhood and some of the deficiencies we had regarding Head Start funding. But my concern is that and from what I understand, the chief academic officer and I have had some conversations about this, and I believe this was shared out to the board this weekend, that if we were to do this particular process or this contract in-house, phase one is where I was getting my numbers confused. Phase one was going to be for the district about $370,000+. If we outsource, it says $328,000+, right? And I know you don't have that in front of you. And the phase two, if we outsource, is $2.2 million, almost 2.3. And if we do it ourselves, it's over $3 million. So obviously there's a savings involved here. But it concerns me that, again, where it seems like we're outsourcing more and more of this information, of these services. We've outsourced legal. We're kind of outsourced PR for right now. There was a question as to whether or not we should keep that as an outsourced item. And I really think that, and I know that right now HR is vacant. And I think that might be a contributing factor of why we're looking at outsourcing, because we don't have the capacity internally right now, we haven't had since May, to be able to continue to get people in here. Is this something, if we take a look at this, is this really the most economical and most efficient way of doing this? I just want to clarify that before we really vote on it, because it is something that I think that it's a concern that where I keep seeing the district outsourcing this stuff. And when you're a contractor, and I've done contract work, sometimes, and I'm not saying that this is my own personal work philosophy, but sometimes you don't have skin in the game, because it's just, you're kind of always in that perpetual temporary state. And I'm concerned that we're kind of building that type of environment within our district.
Yes, sir. Usually I operate under the same presuppositions as you do. We want to do it in-house. We want to build capacity in our people to tackle any challenge. This is a unique case. It's going to enable us to take care of those deficiencies in a manner that a lot of large districts have used. These particular family services and the system that goes along with that can be done so much more economically that we can stop spending quite as much on the services part and have better family services, while at the same time being able to increase the number of teachers with the savings, the number of certified teachers, so we can create blended classrooms, which KDE will approve if we have certified teachers to run those classrooms and actually improve our services, do it more economically, have certified teachers that are not always, but generally more qualified to do the work in the classroom. A lot of this came from the analysis or the work that the Head Start office out of Atlanta did when they were here. Their basic tone was, wow, you guys are trying to do this when other places are doing it so much better. Your deficiencies are coming from these very areas that most districts really don't have the capacity to do. They recommended Shine and others, but they said that this particular company, this particular organization had a strong record of helping large urban school districts with the family services and health documentation and all those things that we've struggled with and the deficiencies.
So this is, you think even long-term that this is going to be a more economically sound path for the district to follow?
Yeah, I think
I know in the short term it is, but in the long term.
Right, I think in the long term it will, and I think that the Shine organization will give us opportunities to really take care of the part we have to be very, very good at, which is the academic student development kind of approach, that we need to have more we need to have more boots on the ground with teachers doing that work so that more kids are school ready.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and the last one is...
Mr. Jones.
Sorry, yeah.
Just quickly, I looked up the company Shine and looked at the services that they offer, and they do in fact specialize in some of the areas that we had deficiencies in. It said on the site that I looked at that they specialized in Head Start and early Head Start, 4,400 children across the nation. And things that they worked with were data management, program design and management, partnership and support, coaching, curriculum, assessment, and engaging families and communities. And if I understand correctly, if I read it correctly, that they have an opportunity to show us what they can do this year. If we do not like what they've done this year, then we will not engage them for the second year of the process, which means they have to show us what they can do. What we know about the feds when they come in and give us a deficiency is they will not go away. They will come back and they will continue to check us. And it's very important to this district that we become and remain the provider for Head Start services. To my knowledge, during my tenure in Jefferson County, we have been the provider for Head Start services. We don't have to be. Other people can. So what I'm reading from this is that we're trying to get it right and keep it right. And I spoke with Dr. Hargens about this afternoon, about there's some concern about staffing and those kinds of things, and the board has to look at everything before steps are taken. But in order for us to move forward in submitting the new grant, it's, here's this word again, critically important that we get it right. So I did do a little time doing some research on it. We will be watching. We do not want to lose Head Start or Early Head Start. That's just my personal opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Well said.
And I will just add that the hour I spent on the phone with our Head Start director in Atlanta left me in no doubt that we needed help and that there was no tolerance for our continuation in this path of deficiency. Now, I might not agree with everything that the federal government sees in the way they evaluated us, but we are evaluated. We are not evaluating in that context. So I think that concludes that topic. The last one, Linda, you pulled down was the regular board meeting schedule, I believe.
Right, and
That's V.
I had one request on that. I'd like for us to think about this. I noticed, I think it was last year, we had Easter Sunday and then a board meeting on Monday, and this calendar is going to work out the same way. Easter is going to be on the 27th, and we have a board meeting scheduled for the 28th, and that was a very difficult thing for me. I don't know about anybody else, but I was just wanting us to talk about that a little bit and see if it's okay for everybody to have Easter on Sunday and a board meeting on Monday. It was just tough for me, and but you know, I'm one, so.
Chris,
I've got a question about this. Is there a particular is there a timeline that we need to do this? Does this have to be approved today, or is this something that we might be able to look at our next meeting?
Well, actually, it doesn't need to be approved today, but it certainly needs to be approved soon because, again, so that people can plan on board meetings and plan their schedule around board meetings and the public knows what to expect. And in terms of the off-site meetings, it gives staff the opportunity to prepare and board members the opportunity to prepare. So that was the reason we were bringing it forward. And Kathy, is it normally around this time that we would bring the next calendar year board meeting to the board?
I'm fine with doing it relatively soon. Dr. Razor, when is the next calendar committee meeting?
It is this week.
It is this weekend. And at the end of that, will they, at our next meeting, will we be looking at a recommendation or voting on a recommendation for the calendar for next school year?
At the end of this meeting, if all goes as planned, we'll have a proposed calendar to recommend to the board for approval at the September 28th meeting. We'll provide that as just information for the board to see and then to be voted on. I believe October 12th is the date.
Okay, so it will, but we would have that by the next board meeting, at least the informational item.
Yeah, you'd see the proposed calendar.
The reason I'm asking these questions is because I'd like to ask if we might be able to postpone this vote until we get a look at what the proposed school year calendar. And one of the reasons I'm asking that is because from at least the tentative calendar that I've seen, and I've shared this with the superintendent and Chairman Jones, is that one of our board dates is actually going to happen in the middle of a proposed October break. So when we're looking at October, or at least for proposed calendars, I see it. I believe we have on October 7th, and then on October 10th and then 14th are all days that we're proposing not to have school. If we meet on the 10th, we're in the middle of that break, and I think that might be a little difficult for some parents and students and other faculty members to be able to make that if they're looking to have, little mini vacations with their families during that October time frame. So I understand that we've adjusted our calendar so we don't meet on the Tuesday right after Labor Day, and I understand that completely. But that gets us off of this two-week rotation where that happens. The converse of that, of course, if we do go on that 2-week calendar, then that means that we're going to have a meeting date on Halloween, which I don't think anyone wants. So I understand there's a give and take to this. So, but I'd like to know if we might be able to postpone this vote until after we get a tentative schedule. And I guess I'd have to make a motion for that. But
Yeah,
I mean,
so-
before I do that, I would like to hear what other people might think about that.
So, Steph?
I know that I got some feedback today about this being a Jewish holiday right now.
Right.
And I got a lot of feedback from my
Right.
district. So has this, I'm just wondering if this has been vetted for Jewish holidays, because this meeting wasn't, and that was offensive to a lot of people. So I don't know, if it hasn't been vetted, maybe we should postpone it. Easter is important to me, and I would prefer not to meet the day after Easter. But that, I didn't know it was Easter.
All right. Let's do this.
So.
Let's not vote on this now. Let's run the traps more carefully. I will, however, state my position, which is this board needs to set an example for this district. Nothing is more important than school. Nothing is more important than learning. And the fact that a holiday ends the day before a board meeting does not move me one iota. We need to put first things first, and we need to show up, and we need to do our work. Now, we need to make sure that we're not inadvertently on a holiday that we shouldn't be on, and we need to not do stupid things like have our meeting on Halloween where there are going to be students out in front of our cars when we drive here. So we need to be smart about it, but that's just one board member's perspective, but I don't think we should be trying to figure out how to enable everybody to stretch long weekends into longer weekends. So let's remove, how do we do this? Frank, do we need a motion?
Your suggestion was that a motion be made to...
Yeah, I think actually, Chris, why don't you make a motion to remove P8 and vote on it separately,
Sure.
as well as to defer action on item V, as in Victor.
Okay.
Is that okay to take them as one? Okay. So that'll...
Let me bring this up in my mailbox where I can read this correctly. Okay. Yes, I'd like to make a motion that item V, approval of regular board meeting schedule for 2016, be removed from the consent calendar for this meeting. Should I also put in?
And then just go ahead and put in that it's P as in Peter 8, I think.
Oh, and
that we vote on that separately now.
Oh, yes. Well, that's going to be two separate, isn't it?
Yeah, but we'll defer the one.
All right. And also, I'd like to make separate motion for item P.8, acceptance of funding from Kentucky Educational Collaborative for State Agency Children for JCPS/State Agency Children's Programs to be voted separately.
Okay, is there a second?
My second is,
okay.
Were you doing two motions at once?
Yeah, that's what it seems like.
Well, I think it's one motion with two elements, but one motion. All right. All right, so Linda seconds, all in favor? Okay, great. So now we will vote on the consent calendar with the exception of item P8 and V. Is there a motion to that effect? Okay, Linda moves, Chris seconds. All in favor? Aye. Okay, and now finally, is there a motion to approve P.8, acceptance of funding from Kentucky Educational Collaborative for State Agency Children, from which Mr. Brady will abstain? Okay, okay, Ms. Porter moves. Is there a second? Okay, Lisa seconds. All in favor? All opposed? All abstaining? Very good. Okay, thank you. The consent agenda is disposed of. Now we have board reports, requests, and planning calendar. Are there any board reports or requests? Mr. Hadaway.
Yeah, I have a request. It's been called out in our presentations today, and I'd like to echo. I would love to see what Dr. Munoz shared with the TEL survey results compared to the benchmark districts, and also what Chris brought about on the ACT results. As a matter of fact, I would love to see that be a pattern in presentations, that an element is always where we are with our benchmark districts.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Diane. Yeah, this is, yeah. Yes, reports, requests, and planning calendar. So reports and requests first.
Okay, thank you. One of the things I would like to ask for is tonight we did receive funding, vote to approve funding for career and technical education, and I would like to, for the board to see how we have in fact spent that money for the last 5 years as it pertains to going to individual schools as we talk about equity in facilities and things like that. So I would like to request that report, please. I would also like to request a numbers report of enrollment for the last 3 years in our schools, and that would be like at the end of the 20 days or whatever, just so we can see what the school enrollments have looked like for the last 3 years. And a report, I had an opportunity last week to go to one of the parent engagement sessions as we're talking about engaging our parents at the California Community Center. It was the first session for A Voice for Our Children, and there's a thorough program plan for parents, and they are working aggressively to get more parent participants. But I think it's an opportunity for us to meet our parents where they are and to have conversations with them. So I just wanted to mention the fact that I did have an opportunity to attend that program last week. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Chris?
I also just want to request, or I guess I should say re-request, some type of report or status on how we are dealing with sex education within the district. Again, I made that request a few weeks back, and I haven't heard anything regarding that. But I'd like to find out how we're dealing with that. If it's a hodgepodge of different programs because of SPDM curriculum oversight, or if there is some concerted effort or unified strategy of how we're dealing with that within our district. I think that's something that we really should take a look at. The other thing I'd like to just give out some kudos to Fairdale High School and their principal, Brad Weston. Board member Duncan, myself, and Chair Jones, as well as the superintendent, went out there today. They had a joint meeting of the Education Committee, state representatives and state senators met out there. It was a really great event. They had a fantastic tour. Member Porter or Vice Chair Porter was talking about vocational studies. The Fairdale has an excellent program out there. It's very impressive, and I just want to give kudos to the administration out there for a great day, and the students were fantastic too. So
great job.
They just want to say thank you and a good job to everyone out there.
Yes, I agree. Linda, you want to?
You can go ahead. Me?
Okay, you, Lisa, sorry. Yes.
Okay, that's fine. On the subject of Head Start, I would just like to request a report on how Head Start classrooms are staffed compared to how other early childhood classrooms are staffed. Is it the same process, or are they pulled from a different pool. So that is a request. And then just some, well, I have one more request, but some kudos first. I've visited 16 schools since the start of the school year, and seeing really wonderful things throughout the county and throughout District 6. Just special compliments to Churchill Park. It's a school that serves some of our highest need students. They have some wonderful community partnerships in place. It's a beautiful facility. I would encourage anyone who has not visited the school. They were very welcoming and said they welcome visitors anytime. And I think it's a remarkable facility for our county to have, and something that we can be very proud of. A shout out to Rangeland Elementary. I was there for their open house, and Dr. Kiggins. It was one of those wonderful experiences where the principal knew every family by name, knew every child, including those who had graduated and moved on to middle school and were back with their younger siblings. And so many families came up to her while I was there to say, thank you for letting our children come to your school. And that was just a lovely thing to see. Several of us were at the open house of Minor Daniels Academy, and they've done such a beautiful job with the facility there. It was a really nice tour. Since we were talking earlier as part of the TEL survey about student behavior, and since that's our restorative academy, I know some of you have heard me say before, I would like to see restorative practices start earlier in the pipeline before folks are at a restorative academy. But since we toured the building when there weren't students present, I would be very interested and hope that there may be an opportunity for folks to go back and visit and actually to see restorative practices in action, and to be able to have a better look and understanding of the training they've had there and what that process looks like.
Okay, thank you. Linda?
And yes, I was very proud of Fairdale today and the program that Brad Weston is leading, all the programs there at Fairdale High School. So you just see such passionate kids about the subjects that they're engaged in there too. I attended Olmsted Academy North's open house the other night, where we recognized former Youth Services Center coordinator Dirk Davis, and he was, I think the gym was named in his honor, and we had an unbelievable turnout. Lots of kids participating and getting awards, and also a chorus sang and was just outstanding, had us all dancing. Then I stopped at Lassiter the other day, and it was so funny. I stopped and was talking to John, and then Sessler, the principal, and then he had ordered blizzards for all of his staff to celebrate the progress that they're making, and they are making some great progress. And so when the blizzards arrived, he asked me to go down to the library, and he said, well, would you like to go down and meet the staff? So I said, sure, I'll go down there and meet the staff and maybe get a blizzard. And so when I came in, the staff, all the blizzards were there, the teachers were all coming in, and I got so many thanks for those blizzards that had absolutely nothing to do. But I told John I appreciated the opportunity to get all those congratulations. But it was wonderful. The teachers are working so hard, and it's just great to get a chance to experience that. But John provided the blizzards.
Okay, Steph.
Very excited about Bellwood and the governor's, I don't know what it's called, Michelle, is it the governor's garden? Yes, Bellwood is going to have a celebration with the First Lady, and they have an active horticulture program teaching science and really healing through use of, the garden. So it's amazing, and there'll be an event at Bellwood School. There are a lot of energy and excitement going on in District 3 for our open houses, and also for a lot of fundraisers. So kudos to the PTA and the schools and the teachers also for all the effort and energy that they're, putting to really showcase our schools. And I just really want to support that. Dr. Hargens had a very successful event with the Building Industry Association. She made some new friends in the technical and career area, to look at the building industry. It's a very growing industry, and there's a lot of jobs that are very well paying. And they're going to be partnering at the 3 career academies, and we're very hopeful about that new relationship. So she was a real hit with that industry. And I think for my request, I know that we have a school to name and a student assignment plan to approve. So I have requested that we get an update on both, and just wanted to again just express my sincere concern for the Zachary Taylor parents, almost 80 plus, that live very near the school, the threat of losing them and having them bus to another school when there's already only about 32% local parents attending currently, local families. And then also the concern of the Norton Commons to make sure that it's being assigned into the right cluster so that there is an equitable opportunity for all children in our district to attend a school that is not overcrowded and under-resourced. And then also just wanted to lift up the synergy that continues with the arts community and JCPS. I met with Kentucky Center, and they're just so excited to further their relationships with us and the Fund for the Arts and some other arts organizations. So I just really think that there is a lot of synergy. There's a program going on right now to try to donate like musical instruments. There's a severe shortage. We have the lucky thing of having many more budding potential musicians than we have instruments. With our more and more free and reduced lunch population in JCPS, it really is a question of equity. Because the instruments that we have had in the past, they're just not stretching as far for the children who can't afford to purchase or rent an instrument. So I do encourage the district, as I did in the work session, to please look at finding funding for musical instruments and to look at funding that this year. But that's it. Thank you.
Okay, I have a couple of points to pile on. First of all, following up on Chris's request for a report on sex ed. I think where that falls is there have been a number of discussions about student health overall, not only reproductive health, but behavioral health and nutrition-related health. And I think as soon as we're through with the strategy, that's one of those items that I guess I would say, Donna, let's figure out how to turn to in a coherent way, because we've all had incoming requests and interests about these topics. So I echo that good point. On Lisa's point about Minor Daniels, I just want to add not only the request for a visit, but just we all remember that we made we sort of made a deal with the community that we would pay close attention to how that was going. And, I think we're probably, sometime in the next few board meetings, we need some kind of an update because the consolidation and the changes and everything. I was also at the open house and was very pleased to be there and with the level of energy that I saw. But, we just have to make sure that place of fragile students is paid attention to. Third, I think with respect to the question of Norton Commons naming an attendance zone, that's going to come back within the next 4 weeks, I believe, and we do have to make sure that that is briefed and we get what we need to get that done. So I add my request for that. And then the last thing, and this is kind of a boring area of board practice, I think we've had a couple of incidents lately where at least I have gotten confused about where board materials are between Friday Update and what's posted on the board portal. We have a great board portal. It's so efficient, and I would just sort of make the request that if it's something that we're going to use for our work on Monday, let's make sure we get it onto the portal so that we can, you know, when we're traveling or have whatever our calendars are, we can know where to find it. That is just such a good, effective way of working. So that's all I have. We can move now to the planning calendar, I think. If there are, Linda, do you have a planning calendar comment?
Yeah, you touched on the beginning of it. We have several new things going on with our Schools of Innovation and Kennedy and the alternative schools and how that's going on at Breckenridge, and all of those are new things. And I'm just looking for the calendar to be maybe a place where we can begin to hear back from some of these and hear how attendance is or how enrollment is, or just hear some feedback from these schools.
Okay. Great. Any other comments on the calendar? If not, a motion to approve the planning calendar. Linda moves. Diane seconds. All in favor? Okay, the planning calendar is now approved. We have 6 persons requesting to address the board on non-agenda items. And I would invite first Lee Kuiper to approach. Lee Kuiper, are you here? Okay, it appears not. Elijah Thomas. Is Elijah Thomas here? Okay. Tom Moffitt, I believe, is here. Mr. Moffitt, you know the rules. You have 3 minutes to speak. At the end of 2.5, you get 1 bell. At the end of 3, you get 2 bells. Thank you for being with us this evening.
I do want to say that I feel that I represent the Kentucky Alliance Against Racism and Political Repression in what I'm saying. I'm again speaking in support of specific suggestions for Vision 2020 presented by Chris Harmer of FOR. They call for including measurable goals, targets for annual reduction of the persistent achievement gaps for 4 groups of students who include more than half of JCPS students. These gaps remain essentially unchanged in spite of decades of effort by JCPS to achieve equity, and emphasized again in Vision 2015. The gaps are not appreciably changing. Actually, in 2014, these gaps increased, at least 3 of the 4 groups, as far as the data that I could determine. Again, I have to call that a crime. It's a crime for all of us in Jefferson County to be allowing that to continue. We must take responsibility, and we must set a goal for positive change. Narrow the gaps each year. Staying even is not good enough. I'm just hoping that I missed hearing such a goal during the staff and board discussion at the work session 2 weeks ago. What I did believe I heard, however, was an exciting possibility that you'll be requesting a waiver from the state in order to broaden the accountability measures, not to get rid of what we have now, but to broaden them and include other things with them. Please finalize and strongly pursue that effort to add other measurements of critical thinking, analysis, and communication. With that, both GCPS and the state must shift focus from moving students shift focus to include moving students from novice to apprentice, as well as to proficient. We have to get started at the bottom. It takes resources and budget decisions, so you have to plan those accordingly. Make sure you state a clear goal for gap reduction, then begin to review the budgets for this year. Identify changes that work, things that already have worked in some of our schools, put them in the budget for more schools. Please, we've got to make change and make it happen.
Thank you, Mr. Moffett. Our next speaker is Matthew Singleton. Mr. Singleton, thank you for being with us tonight. You have 3 minutes to speak. At the end of 2.5, there will be one bell indicating you got 30 seconds left. And then at the end of the 3, there will be 2 bells. So thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you, sir. I think I'm going to open up with a little bit of theater to kind of liven things up. I'll be speaking the part of the character Matthew Brady, who was William Jennings Bryan, the movie Inherit the Wind, going over the Scopes trial. I have come here because what has happened in the schoolroom in your town has unloosed a wicked attack from the big cities of the North. We did not seek this struggle. We are simple folk who seek only to live in brotherhood and peace, to cherish our loved ones, and to have our children taught in the ways of righteousness and of the Lord. But what will they teach them? These idolaters, these priests of evolution, what will they have them do? They would have them measure the distance between the stars and forget him who holds the stars in his hands. They are lost, my friends, for I tell you, if a man is descended from a beast, he must remain a beast. And just as the young wolf will turn upon the old, these innocents will be corrupted, and despairing of salvation will turn upon their fathers, and this land will become a land of Sodom and Gomorrah, a land of pestilence, and of fire, and of hatred, and of death. Back in 2007, I came up here and I spoke of Matthew 18, where Jesus tells his teaching on when people lead young children into sin. Since then, we have only found one of your employees to have raped a girl. We have only found one employee to sodomize a boy. The things I'm going to tell you right now, it's not about whether Christians have a problem with you. It's not whether there's going to be a retaliation from the right. What I tell you right now is that the things that go on in your skill systems have angered God. Now the thing is you worry about those who are transgendered. I don't see any transgendered school system. How many Christian school systems have been brought up not because they always wanted it, but because they felt like they were not welcome? And the thing is they slowly get nudged out. I think about what's happening in our society. 200 youth less than 2 years ago, these young men being turned into hoodlums. These girls walking the streets naked just a week or 2 ago. You know, at the end of the day, I would love to have time, and I don't have that, obviously, to dialogue about bigger, longer issues and stuff like that. But I just have to say, after this is all over, the Pharaoh said in that movie, 10 Commandments, their God is God.
Thank you, Mr. Singleton. Our next speaker is William Hardy. Mr. Hardy.
Good evening. This is the first time I've addressed the board since I was a teenager. Dear JCPS board, I recently attended the August 24th meeting. I am requesting the school board members review the current property tax rate at the next school board meeting, if permitted by Kentucky statute, and request a property tax reduction from the current 71 cents to 70 cents. The Jefferson County Public Schools received over a $7 million increase in property tax revenue in the previous fiscal year in relation to 16 minus $9 million for the mandate from, various mandates from the state of Kentucky, the Commonwealth. Property owners in Jefferson County need a one-year tax break and relief. I'm here to represent over 20 parents that feel the same way but could not attend this specific school board meeting. Please review this policy and give parents, grandparents, and citizens of this county a revenue-neutral property tax rate for this current fiscal year. That was the first issue. The second, and this is more of a personal nature, honestly, I want to express my disagreement with the recent passage of the expanded so-called discrimination policies. And this is all-encompassing, not just for employment or for the discrimination. It was on the agenda item in the last meeting. These sensitive issues should be left to parents, grandparents, and their particular religious faith. The mission of the Jefferson County Public Schools should not include condoning homosexuality, bisexuality, lesbian, and specific transgender individual relationships. I prefer my tax dollars to be used for education relating to English, social studies, science, other academic core content, meals, school lunches, for example, transportation, and even age-appropriate sex education. I say that last part is emphasis, even age-appropriate sex education. So I'm not against sex education in the public schools. These discrimination policies continue the erosion of the true academic pursuit in a time when our students need to prepare for the careers in the 21st century. Finally, whether a person wishes to call these policies a part of a religious faith, whether it be secular humanism or theistic evolution, JCPS should follow the U.S. Supreme Court decisions and keep a high wall of separation of church and state. These policies to promote the religion of secular humanism and theistic evolution need to halt. Please remove this recently passed so-called discrimination policy, and thank you very much for listening. If we're going to remove that, let's bring back the Bible, not just for comparative religion policies, but let's bring it back in school. Let's stop calling it winter break. Let's call it Christmas break if we're going to celebrate secular humanism or theistic evolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy. Our last speaker is Chris Harmer. Mr. Harmer, you know the drill, 3 minutes, bell after 2.5.
I do. I invite you to stand up and mill about while I speak. If you'd like. Take a second. There you go.
Actually, I'm going to stand up and take off my jacket.
There you go. My name is Chris Harmer. I'm the co-chair of the Fellowship of Reconciliation and part of the leadership for the coalition looking for measurable achievement gap reduction goals to be in the Vision 2020 and also to have an overarching statement in the mission statement about reduction of the achievement gap is a real purpose of public education. Equity is not just good for our community, it's a human right. But tonight I'm really here just to speak for somebody who couldn't come. Chanel Helm is, among other things, the past chair of Women in Transition, now known as WIT, because they don't just work with women anymore, they work with all low-income and minority groups who are experiencing economic and racial justice issues. And also she also has a role in a group called Stand Up Louisville, which I think is affiliated with the Black Lives Matter movement. So it represents a lot of people in the 15 to 30 year age range, but up to the 90s as well. In that role, she's talked to those groups about the achievement gap reduction target, and they have come to stand with us in this coalition, and we're expecting other groups as well. She couldn't be here tonight. She is a African-American single mom and is dealing with her 2 kids tonight. May be here sometime in the future, but couldn't tonight, so I'd like to read just a brief statement from her. What we are offering children, what are we offering our children if we don't offer them community? Professionals are not enough. Ms. Helm made it very clear that she's talking about partnering parents and other people in the community to help the school deliver equitable outcomes for all the students. She continues, so when the community, and here she means all of us, including the board and JCPS staff, when the community speaks, we have to be sure that we are speaking for parents who are not able financially or mentally to assist their children with all academic needs. for volunteers who are limited in how they interact with children, particularly around behavior issues, and then when these behavioral problems are compounded more by adding authority, namely the police, as solutions. She wants us to look at this, and each of you to try and put yourselves in her shoes and look at it from the perspective of her clients, the low-income people of our community, the minorities of our community. I am, after the work session tonight, I have to say I'm thrilled about some of the big rocks that you're talking about, including equity spanning a number of different areas, but if it spans many of the areas of the big rocks, it probably is a bigger rock and needs to be in the mission statement. Hope you'll take that into consideration. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Harmer.
Good night.
Okay, thank you. Well, you're an optimist. So that concludes our speakers, and now it is my unhappy duty to tell you that it is necessary that the Board of Education recess and reconvene in executive session at this time. Do I have a motion that the Board of Education enter into executive session for the purpose of a discussion relating to proposed or pending litigation pursuant to KRS 61.8101C of the Open Meetings Act? Is there, okay, Mr. Hadaway moves, Ms. Porter seconds, all in favor? Aye. Okay, thank you everyone. You're welcome to sit here, but we will be gone for a while. Yeah, me too. I was trying to cover that consent